Now. My name is Eric Frazier. It's a beautiful day in Southern California, a great day to talk about the 1968 Fair Housing Act. 2 years ago, the Power is Now embarked upon a journey to learn more about the 1968 Fair Housing Act. And April 11th, 1968, President Lyndon B. Johnson signed it into law after just some incredible events taking place, one with the death of assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King. And then, of course, all the rioting and the burning that took place. Many believe the law was passed just to calm everybody down and not necessarily to further fair housing. Well, that and many other points of discussion we're going to have today with our special guest, Dr. Lee Davenport. Dr. Lee Davenport is a real estate professional. She's an educator. She handles all things concerning real estate. And she's going to talk about the 1968 Fair Housing Act and what it means to her, what it should mean to you and to the world. Thank you, Dr. Lee, for joining us today on this series.
Thank you so much, Eric, for having me. I am super excited to talk about all things fair housing. So I am looking forward to this.
Dr. Lee, I am looking forward to your take on the Fair Housing Act. But before we get into that, we have a tradition on this show. We ask all of our guests, what does the phrase, "the power is now," mean to you in the context of who you are, what you do professionally, and given that we're talking about fair housing today, what does it mean in the context of fair housing?
Absolutely. I love that statement. I am not a known procrastinator. That is not my issue in life. So for me, saying the power is now is really my mantra. I don't believe in delay. I don't believe in waiting. I don't want to procrastinate. Let's do it today. And real estate, unlike I feel other careers and other industries, real estate is such that time is of the essence. So if delay can actually mean denial for us. And we've seen that not just from real estate today, but unfortunately, fair housing. Prior to the Federal Fair Housing Act of 1968, even though different states and some localities had fair housing acts and initiatives, far and large, a lot of places didn't. And so the delay of fair housing was truly a denial. So the power is now, for me, means no delay and no denial.
I love it. No delay and no denial. We do need fair housing now. And you're absolutely right. One of my favorite sayings in real estate is time is of the essence. We have to close on time. And many people have lost out on great deals because they didn't work with a sense of urgency. And I also think that many people are still suffering are being, say, disenfranchised or denied access and opportunity because the Fair Housing Act is not living up to its original intent and goals. Things have improved, but we need more. We need more action. We need more, I would say, enforcement. We need a lot more right now in order to make fair housing a reality for everyone. And that's what we're going to get into today. And I know you are an expert on the matter. In addition to being an educator in all things real estate, you are an author as well about real estate and real estate discrimination in practice by real estate professionals and consumers. So why don't we take a moment here and talk a bit more about you and your organization, what you do as as an educator and your book?
Absolutely. So right now, I have had the privilege, just really in the last 2 weeks, of going from Maryland to DC to Kentucky to Miami. And in all of these different places, Rhode Island, and all of these different places, I've had the opportunity to do one of my favorite classes, and that is to teach on fair housing. I have several 6-hour classes that talk about how to be an anti-racist real estate pro, which is also the name of the ebook. I also have a class on, is fair housing in your blind spot? Or another class is called Welcome-ish, going through the history of when not everyone, not just by race, but including race, wasn't included in what a community could look like and could be made of. So I have the privilege of going throughout the US, not only talking about the history that led to the need for federal fair housing, but also where we are today and what the hurdles and impediments still are as we move forward. So it's been a thrill. And I'll say also some of the things that I challenge people on has been instituted and implemented. That's the thing that is most pivotal, and just it means the most to me, because it's one thing to teach about our history and why we needed these laws, which is important, but it's so rewarding to know that when I leave these conferences or when I finish a webinar, there are changes that are actually being made by real estate companies, by real estate associations, by lenders, by appraisers. So it's been a privilege to have the opportunity to speak on fair housing and what we can do differently.
Well, I appreciate the work you're doing, because we need the education, and we need thought leaders out there sharing with those in the C-suite level to implement these changes. Now, I'm just curious. So can you give us an example of a change that one company or association or group have implemented as a result of your training sessions?
Absolutely. So let's see, I'll just give a little timeline over the last 2 years. So unfortunately, George Floyd's death, as tragic as it was the very thing that for many people became the catalyst of, wait a minute, something is still wrong. We need to do things differently. So I hate that, like Dr. King's death in 1968 was the catalyst for federal fair housing. What I've seen, although I've been teaching fair housing in different forms really for the last 7 or so years, I will say the last 2 years, there has been a much more captive audience of groups that don't normally run to this conversation. You know, we do, from a standpoint, need to take these classes, although not every state requires that we have these classes, but there are many states now that even if it's not a requirement to have a fair housing component every renewal cycle, they are now making it a priority. Even if it's not required, it's becoming a priority. So with that being said, over the last 2 years, I have seen a level of interest and inquiry that, again, I've never seen in the several years that I've been teaching fair housing. So in this time period, I did an op-ed that was featured in Inman News, and it was in reference to our local Realtor Association. From that op-ed, our association not only issued, for the first time in its existence, which is now well over 100 years, an apology for their complicity as well as their participation in discrimination. But they have also moving forward with different initiatives such as data collection so that we can identify how diverse is our association. Is it representative of the community where we are, which we did find it wasn't. So again, there's been so many changes that have come down the pipe as far as that. I've also been talking about how back in 1969 in April, so 1 year after Dr. King's assassination and after federal fair housing was enacted, there was a huge celebration in DC that for many of us would probably be equal to the Grammys or the Met Gala or even the awards programs that we have in our firms every year and in our associations. And one of the things that struck me was that we got away from that celebratory nature of fair housing, because fair housing, rightfully so, should be a time where we are looking at who is not living up to the expectations. But I also believe that instead of always having a stick, which is more punitive, right? You didn't do it right, you're not doing it right, so we're gonna penalize you, which is, again, it's needed, but I also think there's power in the carrot approach. I like to call it the carrot cake, because I don't really like carrots, but I like cake. So carrot cake approach where we are looking to award, let's celebrate, let's award those that are proactively ensuring fair housing is realized today. And it may not just be real estate professionals, it might be some of our vendors, it might be people in the community. Even this year, the National Association of Realtors has started for the very first time its inaugural Fair Housing Awards. There were 4 winners, recipients just this week. So to see these things that I've been advocating for, not just in my classes, but in my monthly race and real estate column that I do for Inman News. I've also been a writer for Huffington Post and Forbes and all of those. So the fact that I've been able to do these op-eds and changes being created, I am, again, humbled. It's amazing. And I know that we as an industry, we are interested in moving forward. I believe there's more people that want to do good than those that are discriminating.
We need to have those recipients on our show. And so this is news to me, and I'm so glad you're sharing it, because I too believe in the carrot versus the stick approach. Although I believe that they do go together, they're both absolutely necessary. And but I don't necessarily agree, though, that the majority of people out there involved in the industry want to do right. And I say that because the evidence doesn't support that. The homeownership rate is still the lowest it's ever been. And it hasn't even been 5 years since we've had lawsuits filed by attorney generals on discrimination, redlining, and then the most recent issue with, bias by appraisers, and we already know about unconscious bias, or conscious bias by real estate professionals, as brought out in the Newsday, expose. And so the bad news really seems to overwhelm us, and as a result of being overwhelmed, it's more of a negative view. And maybe that's just me, but I really feel like the time is now for us to see some real changes in how we are conducting ourselves as real estate professionals and as consumers who are selling their property on their own. And there needs to be some type of, there has to be some type of enforcement to ensure that everyone is playing fair and upholding the law.
I agree with you. I absolutely do. And I will tell you, I am definitely the glass half full girl. I'm the optimist. So I agree though with you. Only reason why I will say I lean towards the glass half full is because I do recognize fair housing is not intuitive. Every class that I teach, every conference that I teach at, it never fails that people who are real estate professionals who do this every day for a living, who have had some type of education on this. Like I said, not every state requires this every renewal cycle, right, but they've had something more than the public, right? Every single class, there are people like, I had no clue. If I had known this, I would have been more aware of my own unconscious biases. I would have done different steps. So for me, I get encouraged by that. I get encouraged that at least the people I'm coming across in conferences, and we know that is going to be a skewed audience because, of course, if you're voluntarily attending a conference on fair housing, again, even if you aren't getting it 100% right, I would again say you probably lean towards wanting to get it right. So I know I'm around the people that are more likely champions of fair housing than not. So I agree with you. But I feel like the only way we can move forward is that optimism. I feel like otherwise it feels like there's no hope. But there is, because again, I keep coming across people that are like, my mind is blown. I didn't realize what happened prior to 1968 because, that was 54 years ago. And at this point, the industry as a whole, I think the average is in the 50s, the average age is in the 50s, which means most of us were either children or not born, right?
That's right.
So yeah, so there's this history that many of us don't even realize. And then when I talk about the manifestations today, like you just mentioned, again, mind blown because so many of us operate in a bubble in real estate, right? We're focused on our clients, how to get our deals closed. And this news about, actually today I just shared on my Instagram account how as of this week, Redfin is now going to pay $4 million as well as change their hiring practices and offer fair housing classes because of their litigation that began in the year 2020 regarding modern day redlining. And when I posted it on Instagram, people are like, oh, I had no clue that they even had a case or that there was even issues. So to your point, we've still got a lot to improve, but I also know it's not intuitive. And the more we can expose people to how it still manifests today, the better off I think we'll be as a whole.
Well, Dr. Lee, 54 years is a long time since the passage of the 1968 Fair Housing Act. And I think I would be more optimistic if I had seen some real, concrete changes that have taken place. But I learned the other day that 98% of all appraisers are white. The majority of banks that I've worked for and that many of my peers have worked for, the majority of loan officers, mortgage advisors are white. The lack of diversity, even in real estate, it's changed over the years where from a gender perspective, women now dominate real estate, but the inclusion of African Americans, people of color, very low percentages. And so the lack of representation is one of the reasons why I think we haven't seen the improvement and that people are just flat out ignorant of what the law is and what unconscious bias is and how they're behaving. Secondly, is the lack of leadership, thought leadership on the subject matter by those who are in charge, those who are doing the hiring, those who are making dreams come through forming real estate firms, large and small, and banks and mortgage brokers, large and small. They are simply not either interested, or they haven't had the exposure because of their own upbringing to diversity, to see it as something they need to manage to. And so these are really, kind of structural issues, right? And I think that's why today, 54 years later, the homeownership rate for African Americans particularly is the same as it was when they started tracking. And that has to improve, especially as the price of homes continue to rise. And many of us, because of the income restraints and other being able to save money, are going to be locked out permanently of home ownership. And so this is an important topic. I'm glad you're here to talk with me about it. And I'm glad you're doing your part. I mean, I take my hat off to you for traveling across the country, educating people, changing hearts and minds, and to do it through speaking and in writing. And so we're going to take a break. And when we come back, I want to learn more about the books you've written on this matter, and make sure that our audience and our listeners know how to get it. For those of you just tuning in, we're talking to Dr. Lee Davenport. All things real estate is what she teaches on. She's an expert on fair housing, and we're discussing the 1968 Fair Housing Act. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, more from Dr. Lee. Hello, my name is Eric Frazier, and I'm a Vice President and Mortgage Advisor with First Bank. My license number is 461807. Now, I cover 48 states. That's right, I'm able to lend in 48 states. So if you're watching this video, give me a call. First Bank has been around since 1910. We are a private bank, and we are able to do just about anything. You need a business loan? Talk to First Bank. You need a personal loan, an auto loan, a boat loan? Talk to First Bank. We do it all. Now, my role as a mortgage advisor is to assist our clients with purchasing a home or refinancing a home. And First Bank has some incredible programs. So the first one is the professional program, which is for doctors and for lawyers, as well as CPAs, as well as attorneys. So these are professionals that are able to finance up to $1 million with only 5% down and no mortgage insurance. And we're talking about an intermediate arm where it's fixed for a 7-year period at interest rates that are below 3%. Contact me if you're interested in our professional program. We also offer down payment assistance programs for FHA, VA, USDA programs. We have programs that will give you enough money to cover the down payment and just about all of the closing costs. Now, not all of it, but almost all of it. You may only have to bring in, after all is said and done, maybe 1 or 2% of the purchase price to close. Down payment assistance. We are leading the conversation in down payment assistance here at First Bank. And then, of course, we offer all types of portfolio programs, super jumbo loans, up to $3 million or more. I tell you, if you're looking for a great bank with a mortgage advisor with a lot of experience to assist you and to help you navigate through all that we have to offer, please give us a call. I am a mortgage banker for 40 years. I've been helping people to achieve their American dream of homeownership and assisting them with refinancing their properties. I have a master's in business administration with an emphasis in finance. I know what I'm doing. I can provide you great advice as a mortgage advisor in selecting the right program. So reach out to me. You can call me directly at 714-475-8629. That's 714-475-8629, or drop me an email at eric.frazier@fbol.com. Look forward to hearing from you. If you want to get started right away, go to applytobuynow.com and you can start your application right now. If you'd like to download my mobile app, please go to qualifiedtobuynow.com, where you can download my mobile app and receive more information about the programs we have to offer and schedule an appointment to meet with me. Thank you for watching. And we're back. For those of you just joining us, welcome to The Power Is Now. We've been talking about the 1968 Fair Housing Act all this month, folks. April is Fair Housing Month, and it's important to me, and I believe it should be important to all real estate and banking professionals that we are promoting the law, upholding the law, supporting the law, and supporting others who are trying to do the right thing as it relates to fair housing. 54 years have gone by, and we're asking the question, have things improved? Well, with me today is Dr. Lee Davenport, and she is an author, an educator, and a specialist in the area of fair housing. And we've been having a great conversation so far. Again, Dr. Davenport, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule, traveling and speaking, to meet with us on our own little radio show.
I, again, Eric, am so happy to be here. Thank you for, one, allowing me to be here, but two, for just doing this. The fact that you're going to have all of these conversations on this topic, it is so needed. So Godspeed to you.
Well, thank you very much. And again, this is our second year in the Fair Housing series, and we hope to do this series until time is no more. And until we see the kinds of change I think we all want to see as it relates to housing. Now, you are an author, and as I can see, for those of you who are watching on Apple TV, Roku, you can see the books on her screen. You are a prolific author. You're writing for newspapers and magazines as well. Tell us about the one that just really stands out to me is Anti-Racist Realtor. Tell me about that book and the others that you have authored.
Well, How to Be an Anti-Racist Real Estate Pro, the book, the ebook, it's an ebook and it is free. I purposefully, again, wanted this to be more of my service to the industry. So this ebook is really a compilation of many of the articles that I wrote in 2020, as well as 2021, that, again, I was getting feedback from real estate companies, from associations, from lenders, from vendors saying, I had never heard this. I've never read this before. I didn't know this. So I said, okay, an article is great, but an article shelf life, so to speak, doesn't last long. So I was like, okay, what can I do just so this has a longer life so that people can reference it again and again? So that's where the ebook came from. And again, instead of making it a printed book like my other books, I wanted to be able to offer it for free. So that was the most economical thing. But what this covers, so it starts off with a very brief history of There Goes the Neighborhood. That's a statement that I wanted to use and really show that there were not only government policies, but we as real estate professionals, we were unfortunately the bad actors that contributed to unfair housing. So that statement, There Goes the Neighborhood, is often used to signify, oh, well, a person of color, particularly someone Black, is moving in and they're ruining the neighborhood. But in actuality, again, it was policies. It was things done by the real estate profession that cemented the fact that appreciation would be undermined and really destroyed when people of color were given opportunities. So I go through, again, just more of the brief history of how and why we needed fair housing. Then from there, I talk about what's going on today. From that glass half full standpoint, I talk about some of the companies and even associations that are doing initiatives that are groundbreaking. We have some companies that are in formerly redlined areas, like in Metro Chicago, and they're saying, look, we are going to offer scholarships for people of color. We want to diversify the professionals, because as you mentioned before break, that is a big part of the problem. Is, I always call it the elephant in the room, that the profession is not diverse. So even before we can address clients and how buyers and sellers are treated, we have to treat our colleagues of different backgrounds better and welcome them into the fold. So there, I mentioned the different companies that are doing innovative things that I feel personally, that's why I shared them, any firm could do. And I was hoping that it would inspire and encourage. And then I also share some of the negative sides of being a professional, particularly a Black person or a person of color, because I have even, my own story as far as being a professional real estate agent, broker, managing broker, and now trainer, is that often when people see my name, Lee, or hear Dr. Lee, or even Dr. Lee Davenport, they think I'm a white male, or maybe they might even think I'm Asian, since I often go by just Dr. Lee. Yet when I show up, I have had people, which is like the audacity, but they will say, oh, you're Black. Oh, you're young. Oh, you're a woman. And then go into saying even more. It wasn't left up for me to assume or guess. They would say, well, are you sure you're really versed about this? Do you have a doctorate from a university, or are you like Dr. Dre? And it's, wow, all of those are considered. Some people call those micro aggressions. I don't call them micro though.
Oh, okay. No, that's macro.
Like that, those type of things. And it's not just me. We've done even a video series on my YouTube channel just showing, and I referenced them in that ebook. And since it's an ebook, it's clickable. So I've got YouTube videos that allow different professionals, Black women, Black men, Latino, Asian, and white people share just some of the issues we, as just the professionals, again, before we can even talk about the clients, it's like we've got to make opportunities available for those that want to work in this industry. So yeah, so that book covers quite a bit. It runs the gamut. And of course, I never believe in just giving history or even saying where we are today without giving hope for what's next. Where do we go from here? What are some things that we can do? So that is my love letter, in a sense, to this industry, and a request for us to do better and make it more inclusive than it's ever been.
I cannot wait. I just regret that I hadn't had a chance to read the book before this interview, but I'm all over it. I promise you that. And I want to encourage everyone watching or listening to go and download the book. It's free. Now, where can they go get this book?
Absolutely. Feel free. Just go to my website, which is just my company's name, Learn with Dr. Lee, Lee.com.
Now, also, I mean, I love everything you've said about the book and the education piece and the solution piece, which we're going to talk about some solutions a little bit later. But one thing that kind of resonates with me, and that is the lack of diversity. So when you go to these conferences, all you see, and this has been my experience, well, when I've gone to a state conference or a national conference with NAR, I just see a sea of everyone but me, a sea I mean, and it's ironic that every time I go to the conference, the few African Americans I see, I know them out of thousands of people. I mean, it's like it's it's a problem, and I love the fact that some companies are making the investment in terms of scholarships to work in predominantly Black areas, or to hire or to help African Americans or people of color to acquire franchises. I know that's the case with Coldwell Banker. Are you familiar with their program?
I am, yes. And again, I'm just so thankful that more of these initiatives are starting to spread across the country.
So I see these other books on the screen, and for those of you who are listening, you may see them on her website. Go to her website and get the books, but we have other books. So share a little bit about the others that you have written.
Absolutely. I'll go in the order that they were written. So Plan to Win is a workbook that is something that I created as my first book, where whether someone had the time or even the funds to get coaching, they could kind of walk through that book on their own to establish their real estate sales and marketing. Now, I will say I will probably be doing an update. People still buy that book, but I, as a person who has leaned heavily into social media, I do talk about certain things in social media that I think in that book I would either eliminate or update, just because, again, times have changed. But I did do, at least I tried to be conscientious about making evergreen statements when it came to social media, because I knew writing that book, I think I wrote that in 2015, that, 7 years, 5 years later, things are going to change. So it's still purchased though. People, like some of the bookstores, they're like still selling out of it. So that tells me it's still quite a bit of evergreen content that's still relevant. So that's great. Then I also have Profit with Your Personality. That book I wrote to give a layman's version of my doctoral dissertation. So I had the opportunity to do my doctoral dissertation on some of the top 1,000 agents in the nation to determine, from a marketing standpoint, how do you profit with your personality? How do you fuse your personality into your day-to-day activity? Because what we found through this doctoral research was that those that understood their personality, they typically were top producers. It's, sometimes we have this notion that in sales, you've got to be someone else, you've got to change who you are. And honestly, in this type of sales, which if you're doing residential, commercial is a little different, but with residential, where you're dealing with people and their families and their lives, it was really all about who you are, your personality. So what we were able to do with this book and just with my research was identify which marketing techniques go with which personalities. And there's over 70 marketing techniques. So we're able to kind of drop them into buckets based on personalities. And that way people can win. So this research and book has been around since 2017, and it's been amazing, all of the testimonies we've seen over the years of people saying, even as late as this year, 2022, saying how much it's helped them to really create a strategy. That's what I believe in. I don't believe in the spaghetti method, where you throw something against the wall and just wait to see what sticks, because that wastes a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of energy. I like to be very strategic. And then the other book is Resilient Real Estate Women, which I was a co-author in. So this is a book written by some of the top producing agents as well as coaches of women, both here in the US and in Canada. And it was a great book to create together. We did a whole conference around it last year that went throughout Canada and US. And it's just been, that's the book, even though it says Resilient Women, I think it's such an encouragement for anyone that ever faces anything that tries to knock you off your game, right? Because that resiliency, we all need it at some point. So it really taps into that.
Here at The Power Is Now, Dr. Lee, we believe that knowledge is power. And, normally for most people, when they know better, they do better, right? When they get the information, they make adjustments and changes. And now is the time to make the change, whether it be as a real estate professional and embracing fair housing, or understanding really how to build your business using with a clearer understanding of your personality and who you can work with and who you can't, to not being part of the problem, but being part of the solution as it relates to fair housing. And so, and I can't wait to read all of your books. And I want to encourage everyone who is watching or listening to go to her website. Provide that website one more time for our podcast listeners.
Absolutely. It is just Learn with DRLEE. So learnwithdrlee.com.
Learnwithdrlee.com. All right, so let's transition back to fair housing. I was speaking to Ray Carlisle, and he is like an icon in housing, one of the co-founders of the National Investment Division of the National Association of Real Estate Brokers and their housing counseling agencies. He said that the 1968 Fair Housing Act was only passed to keep us quiet. And that's the reason why there's no real teeth. There's no real authority. There's no real penalties associated with violating the law. And that made sense to me because of all that was going on. Cities were on fire, rioting, and it was just, in fact, I was listening to the speech that Lyndon B. Johnson made and talking about the passing of the 1968 Fair Housing Act. And the first thing he addressed was the violence that was going on. And then he moved to saying, we need to sign this law now. And that's so often the case when communities erupt into violence, that, there's a great deal of criticism and about the violence and the rioting, but no real substantive commentary as to why it's taking place. And so in the context of fair housing, Ray Carlisle is saying, hey, he got it signed just to calm everything down. And this is why the law doesn't really, has not really met its goals, its real potential, and why there needs to be more enforcement. And so my question to you, do you believe we still need a Fair Housing Act? If so, why?
Sure. So what I always like to say when I'm teaching a class, and I feel like people can relate to this, I always like to ask people, have they ever seen Dateline? Which is horrible to watch if it's the middle of the night and you hear a bump in the house, right? Or some people have even watched Netflix new show Tinder Swindler, or there's even a whole channel, the ID channel, that covers all of these different instances where laws are violated, right? So even just taking off our real estate hat, we are able to see just in the world today, yeah, there's murder. Yeah, there's all types of things that are happening to people. So we know that laws do not, and really have not ever said, poof, bam, boom, they're gone. This is perfect now. Bibbidi boppity boop, right? It's not magic that says this will never occur again. That's not what a law has ever done in any area. So unfortunately, fair housing is no exception. And with that being said, that is even more reason why, for me, we have to make sure that with these acts, with these laws, just like I mentioned, just with the Redfin lawsuit, the fact that there was a lawsuit that was brought against them. Here we are almost 2 years later, but now they've got to pay multi-millions. They have to do a better job diversifying their staff. This is all that came out of the settlement. It is so vital for me that we report things because, and so what I always say, it's not laws that prevent unfair housing. It's the fact that we're reporting it. You've even mentioned in our conversation today, appraisal bias. So this groundswell of watching news reports where people are like, I got an appraisal and it was one amount, my white friend came and it was $500,000 more, or even just several hundreds of thousands of dollars more. It's the reporting that oftentimes leads to, whether it's a lawsuit, whether it's even the company that has committed the violation voluntarily saying, we're going to make some changes, we're going to do better. So for me, we as professionals have to do the reporting. Well, as I mentioned, just this week, I am going to different associations at the end of Fair Housing Month. And many of the people I'm coming across, which is why I'm teaching on it, we, the real estate professionals, don't even know how to make reports. Then the other thing that we've seen is that when people do have complaints or instances of unfair housing, maybe their spidey senses are tingling sometimes, again, because we as the professionals aren't educated on the process. And maybe this is my preferred vendor they're working with, right? So this is my favorite vendor, and you're feeling like something happened that was discriminatory. Again, we're finding that when the agents aren't aware of how to report, and one, that you should report every single instance. It shouldn't be, oh, well, I work with him, that's not what he meant. No, if a client speaks it, then we need to report it. It makes me think of, like, in New York, they on the subway, they have like, if you see something, say something, right?
Right.
That is one of the biggest things that I am trying to, again, just help educate professionals on, help educate associations and firms in making it more of their policy, because I even did a YouTube video where we interviewed some of the people that have had appraisal bias. They didn't know what to do. And when they went to their lenders to say, hey, there was a problem, and many of us as agents have dealt with this just when we don't like the appraisal. It may not be race related, it may not be fair housing violation, it's just we don't agree with the appraisal, and there's always this vehement pushback. So one of the things that I'm champion for is a change in the process to report. And I will say that the National Fair Housing Alliance, as of this year, they are also now, which I'm thankful for, they are a huge organization now pushing this too. And they are working with different appraisal companies. And again, it's because of the groundswell of the reports, the news reports that have shared this appraisal bias and other things that are happening. So long story short, we need laws, but laws don't stop violations. People that report can be a part of stopping violations. When people, again, recognize there is this camaraderie of fair housing, right? Then it's harder for perpetrators to exist. So we need laws, but they are not that bibbity boppity boo, end of story, magical solution.
I love bibbity boppity boop. You're absolutely right. It's laws are not magic, but that speaks to perhaps some more sinister and more serious issues as it relates to fair housing. First, with the media. I mean, I can't believe that there's been no national news. Redfin is a national brand. No national news, no local news. You don't hear about on radio or TV. The media simply either does not care or it's not sensational enough to cover some very important litigation like this so that the community and other real estate professionals know about it. That is a problem. And this is why, this is one of the things that we're trying to achieve as a media platform, having a singular focus on housing and home ownership. We're bringing to light, we're amplifying the voice of those who are in the business like you are of educating, and we're being a resource for the community and for real estate agents who want to do the right thing in building their brand and being a thought leader about home ownership and helping to remove some of the barriers that exist because of discrimination. The second issue that you bring up, and this really, to me, really speaks to leadership, and that is the law itself, in and of itself, you're absolutely right, has never changed anything. It takes individuals and it takes change in the hearts and minds of the individuals to actually see the goals and the objectives of these laws actually come to fruition. And so how do you change the hearts and minds of real estate professionals? It's like in policing, how do you change the hearts and minds of police officers so that there is a culture where, that would not support the unarmed shooting of a Black man or the mistreatment of a young Black child or the bias that they're guilty before innocent and judged before a jury. How do you change the hearts and minds in the real estate profession? When you see a Black person and maybe he doesn't drive a very nice car, you make assumptions about their ability to qualify, or even if you want to show them a house or you steer them to a different neighborhood. This requires a change in hearts and minds. And I think it starts at leadership. We have to really look at individuals who are leading these companies that have created or allowed these cultures, these environments to exist, whereby agents have no clue that they ought to report someone who is doing something wrong, or that they're not aware of any mechanisms in place, any 800 numbers, forms, or what have you, to report those who are perpetrating, those who are denying access to potential buyers. And so it really starts at the top, and we need to see more changes happening there. And that maybe starts also with diversity at the top. So just like you go to a NAR convention or any state association convention, you see a sea of everybody but us. We need more diversity at the leadership level, and perhaps when that happens, we'll see it trickle down to the culture and changing the hearts and minds of real estate professionals.
I absolutely agree with you. I think this is where so much of the work that we're trying to do, this is the ultimate hope, is that we will, one, see more diversification of different groups, but we all know all skin folk ain't kin folk. So it's diversification, but then again, there's still this education. You've got to know and understand what we're up against, right? And then to your point, I'm really pushing this right now. I personally believe that if we can get more into that celebratory spirit that they had in 1969, and that again is now starting to, I feel like it's a snowball. It's starting to snowball again. We need it, because if people can be incentivized, I mean, this is America. It's a capitalistic society. So the more we can help people get excited about it and see tangible rewards from it, I think that's going to be a big part of the puzzle. I think so. It's all of the things we've talked about. There is no one silver bullet.
No.
So many pieces that add up to this.
As you know, we have the National Association of Real Estate Brokers, the National Association of Hispanic Real Estate Professionals, the the Asian Real Estate Association of America, and the LGBTQ plus Real Estate Alliance. And so we now have these silos to represent their constituents, their communities, because of the private sector and the leadership in general are not really addressing it collectively. And so organizations have had to form to address their unique needs in real estate, in the sale of homes, in the management of real estate, in the renting of homes, in the employment of real estate agents, and seeking diversity. Do you see an improvement in the real estate industry? Do you see an improvement as it relates to diversity and, I say, inclusion, given the fact that we have all these minority associations that exist?
I want to say, again, I'm a glass half full girl. So I will say yes with a caveat. So yes, but there is so much room for improvement. And that is something that, again, at the local level, I have a bird's eye view because I do serve on our Diversity and Inclusion Council for our local Realtors Association. And just something we've done locally is we have now, every organization you've mentioned, the local chapters, we are doing more things to collaborate and to work together. And I think that is something that we absolutely need to see more of. I think it's a good start. That's where I feel like we are. We're still in the starting blocks of all of this. To your point, we're 54 years out. So it feels like we should be much further along. But we're still in the starting blocks. So good start. Mm-hmm. I don't like to discourage efforts that are taking place, but I do absolutely think there should be many more things that are done to incorporate all of these different interest groups to make sure their needs are met by the larger community, and to ensure that eventually there isn't as much of a need for different interest groups to break apart. That I think would be the ultimate goal. But again, that may be another 54 plus years out.
Yeah, I believe the damage is so profound as relates to race relations from 1863. Juneteenth is coming up. You know what happened in Texas 2 years later. The resistance of including, African Americans and people of color in general is still very palpable everywhere. And so I don't see these organizations ever going anywhere, but in fact, actually growing and taking the lead to reach out and to work together with other organizations so that there can be true equity and diversity and our approach to housing for everyone. So I love what your association is doing, because doesn't it all really start existentially? Our own experience in life, it kind of informs how we view people, how we treat people. And if you were raised and you never had a Black friend, never went to a Black house, never knew, and all you heard was negative things, it goes to reason that, you're going to be somewhat, hesitant in doing business with an African American, whether you're hiring them, whether they're moving next to you, whether them, cutting your yard or whatever it might be, you're going to seek out something that you're more comfortable with. And so I think the association having events where people can get to know each other, and I think ultimately that's where we're going to see as we truly get to know each other, we're going to see improvement, I think, in race relations and the lack of and less discrimination. But it starts with the leaders, like in your organization, implementing, initiating, ideas like this. And I take my hat off to them. This is something that should be modeled across the country. And it needs to go even further with real networking groups where they are actually intentional, absolutely intentional of networking with an African American or an Asian or Latino, not by accident or they just so happen to have a buyer, but an actual intentional strategy with support by leadership and organizations where people can truly work together, because I think that's where the opportunity lies.
Agreed. And, NAR has started a Inspire Mentor program, which I think is a part of all of this conversation. So whether it's mentoring or sponsorship, whatever you want to call it, it's an opportunity, to your point, to those that have been the dominant groups in the industry to mentor and to engage and connect with those that have been marginalized. So the more that this can be done, again, it's happening, it's starting at the national level, it's filtering through to the local level. But again, there's more to be done. There's more to be done. So good start, but we've got to keep it going.
Yeah, it is a good start. And I certainly hope that others will follow suit with your association. In fact, I want to give a shout out there. What's the name of the association you're involved in where they're doing this?
Yeah, so I'm in Atlanta. This is the Atlanta Realtors Association. Whoop, whoop.
All right, Chocolate City. I have never been to Hotlanta, and I am looking forward to going one day and see all the beautiful people and the great real estate that's happening out there as well. Now, there's one other thing that's going on, and that is, with technology, we have this coding and the programming, and no one ever thought that the coders and the programmers might have also unconscious bias. And so another way to discriminate, and I've always believed that as it relates to FICO scoring, because if you just look at the makeup of the Fair Isaac Corporation, you can understand why it's a similar problem as to why there's appraisal bias, right? I mean, so with this, I would say coding, the bias involved in coding, do you see, how do we stop that? How do we make that not another hurdle that we need to get over when it comes to fair housing?
Yeah, so unfortunately, but fortunately, this is the same issue, and that is the diversification of those that do the work, right? So it's been called by different professors at Harvard and Yale the new Jim Code, which is a play on Jim Crow, right? And again, the issue comes down to, if we don't have diversification in those that are doing the coding, then sure, problems will creep up and there won't be anyone on the team to say, wait a minute. And some of the things that we've been looking at, and I'll say again, the Atlanta Realtors Association already has the mindset of tapping the HBCUs that are here, since Atlanta has quite a handful. But that's something as well where some companies have said that are creating real estate tech, hey, well, we just don't have a funnel of people of color. Well, the fact that we do have HBCUs, and even within universities, to your point of the groups that we have in the real estate industry, most universities have these offshoot groups, right? So groups that represent, whether it's a racial category, whether it's sexual orientation, so forth. You've got these clusters. So the fact that there needs to be more recruitment and more mentoring and sponsorship and more engagement with all of these groups, it's bittersweet because it's easily identifiable. So that's the sweet part. Like, okay, we know what this is, but it's so rampant. It's in real estate leadership. It's in coding leadership. It's everywhere we go. There is this diversification problem that I think it's an easy solve. And that is sponsor, mentor, but not every company is doing it.
I agree with you. It is an easy solve, and it starts with leadership. It starts with leadership. And I don't know, I think boards need to come together. They need to be diversified, and they need to get rid of some people. I mean, just frankly, get rid of some people who are not reflecting the communities, have not bought into fair housing, not bought into diversity. They need to be gone. And if not, then boards need to be held accountable by the shareholders. I mean, I don't know. We are a capitalistic society. Sometimes, money and the threat of losing money is what's needed. That's why boycotts can be very effective if well organized. But because the solutions are readily available, they're easy to implement, to at least start, and they just need support of leadership. Last question. Everything starts in the hearts and the minds of individuals. If you grew up in an all-white neighborhood, you're going to bring that whole culture and environment to your profession, no matter what it is. And so in the case of real estate agents, when I was watching the Newsday series and just agent after agent after agent, just discouraging, not serving, and all because of the color of their skin, it made me think about, really selling real estate in general. Every real estate agent was, before they were an agent, they were perhaps just an individual. Maybe they owned a home, maybe they didn't. And they bring to that profession their own personal experiences. And these are the same people now licensed who are discriminating. And I'm wondering, in the for sale by owner movement with technology and education online, a lot of consumers think that they can do a real estate agent's job better than them, or they can save themselves a lot of money. Do you think that for sale by owners pose another serious threat to homeownership to people of color because they're not under any oversight? There's no license or education or continuing education in regard to fair housing or lending. And so they are innocently or intentionally discriminating, and especially during a time where inventory is so low that this could even be more impactful than perhaps in a normal market.
That's such a good point, and absolutely. So unfortunately, as we've already talked about, we as the professionals often don't understand the nuances of why federal fair housing was needed, what it looks like today, and that there are still infringements because laws don't stop violations. So that's the professional, the person that does this every single day. We don't always get it because it's not intuitive. It's not. So then when you look at someone who doesn't do this every day, they are DIYing it. And we know how this is. I know my doctor gets tired when I'm like, I Googled it and I read this and I saw this, and it's like, so there is absolutely a larger liability. But what I believe in is that we as the real estate professionals, sure, we may not represent the seller on a transaction, but we should absolutely represent the buyer. We should be informing and we have to become educators. I'm a big proponent of that, where if you have a farm area, everybody in your farm area that's looking to buy a home should understand the process and things that can come up. They may not understand every detail of fair housing like we would, but if they're at least attuned to the fact that something may be off, and if my spidey senses are tingling, I need to reach out to HUD or to the state's real estate commission or to my local real estate agent. I believe that this is our opportunity. And this is what I talk about a lot of times in our lead generation courses, because if you are not the person that is that trusted real estate advisor for everyone in your database, everyone in your network, then you are not doing your job. So although for sell by owners may not want to, may not see the need to have an agent, every single buyer should see the need to have representation. They should know, I don't do this every day. So I'm open to not just fair housing violations, but so many, we all know as professionals, so many things can happen in a deal where I think of the old Tom Hanks movie, Money Pit. I know that's really old. People may not remember, but it was so funny because they bought this house and they're living in it and it's falling apart. And it's one of those buyer beware. But buyer beware should mean you need your own representation in the form of a real estate professional.
Yeah, no, I agree. Buyer representation, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, in many states, selling real estate is the practice of law. That attorneys are involved. And so who knows, that may even happen here one day in California. But the reality is that it is the practice of law to an extent, and understanding the ramifications of the documents you're signing and the terms you agree to, and then the seller's cooperation and disclosures and all those things. I mean, it is financial suicide for a buyer to purchase a home without representation. But at the same time, I think that it's equally a great deal of financial liability for a seller to try to sell their home on their own as well, especially if they're, it's one thing if you're a real estate professional and you want to sell your home, but if you're not, I think you take on unnecessary risks, all to save a few $1,000, and unintentionally breaking federal laws that have financial fines associated with them, and or criminal laws, depending on the extent by which you may, innocently discriminate and or, refuse to sell to someone who doesn't necessarily look like you. One of the things that I'm proposing is that the state get involved in the sale of real estate, like they are in the sale of insurance, and the sale of securities, and the sale of medical devices and drugs. The state is intimately involved in it. And I think that the state is already involved in the sale of real estate as it relates to real estate professionals, but they're not involved in the sale of real estate as it relates to the product itself. And I think that a permit should be required. If a person really doesn't want to use a real estate agent, they need to apply to the state, and the state should have requirements, at least 40 hours of education around fair housing and discrimination, and they should charge whatever they want to charge to cover the costs associated with the state managing that, so that the client is fully informed, or the seller is fully informed and aware of what the rules are, and what the liability is if they violate the rules. And I think just perhaps going through that process of obtaining the permit, they may at the end decide to hire a realtor anyway and not take on all of this knowledge, because ignorance is bliss. And I think that since real estate and real estate sales is such a significant part of our GDP, I'm amazed that there isn't regulation around it in and of itself, and not just those who sell it.
Yeah, so many great points, and it's interesting with ignorance of the law is no excuse, right? Is also the other statement. I love it. I think that's such a great idea to have permits for sale by owners, or really anyone, particularly if you're not using a licensed professional who does this every day to help you. So great idea. Let's lobby for it.
I'm gonna be seeking out your help on doing that. I'm already speaking to my local representatives, and we'll see if this actually, gets some buy-in and some momentum, and we can go to Sacramento. I'm not looking for a permit to replace a license. It would be a temporary thing, maybe 90 days, six months, and then you have to renew it and pay another fee and perhaps do other things. But I think something has to happen, because you see the trend, the DIY trend it's just continuing to grow, and it's a good thing and a bad thing. I mean, knowledge is power. It empowers people to do more things. But you shouldn't do, I wouldn't try to do surgery on myself now that I can watch surgeries on YouTube, right? I wouldn't try it, but you never know. Someone might try to do surgery on themselves because they watched the YouTube video. So, Dr. Davenport, this has been a great conversation with you. I really appreciate your time with me and talking about fair housing. And I'm so impressed with the work that you have done, the books you've written, and I cannot wait to hear you speak at one of your conferences. We want to invite you back to The Power Is Now, and to just share more of your knowledge with our audience and with our viewers and our listeners. And folks, I want to encourage you to share this video if you're watching on our social media channels or you're watching on television. And if you're listening to the podcast, please share this with everybody you know. You got to get her books. And if you need a speaker, you got to book her. She'll come and speak at local associations and others. And so, Dr. Lee, let's take a moment and I want to give you the stage here. Final comments on fair housing, your thoughts, and we'll end the show.
Well, thank you again, Eric. This has been a delight, and I just really appreciate having this opportunity with you. I will share, and you mentioned this earlier, the cost aspect of this, and how for many of us, it's not until we talk about the green. So one of the interesting things that came out within the last year by Citibank, or maybe they're just called Citigroup now, but they found that just from the year 2000 to 2020, so a 20-year span, this is all post federal fair housing, they found $218 billion was lost in the American economy due to discrimination, due to exclusion. And to know that this is an industry where we've lost $218 billion, even though I know a lot of people last year in 2021 had their best year yet. Can you imagine what the American society, our culture would be with that infusion? So the interesting thing is that fair housing is in the best interest of everyone. It's for those that are only in this to make money. It's still in your best interest. I'm in it to build communities. So either way you look at it, building communities or to make money, to establish your financial legacy, fair housing does that. It does both.
Dr. Lee Davenport, author, trainer, speaker, entrepreneur, extraordinary real estate professional, here on The Power Is Now TV. Thank you, folks, for watching and or listening. Please share this information. Download our app, Power Is Now TV, and share the app with others about this very, very important topic, the 1968 Fair Housing Act. Is it making a difference? I believe that it can. But as Dr. Davenport said, laws never really changed anything. It is people changing their hearts and minds about people that's when real change can take place. And so we got to be the change we want to see in the world. Thank you for watching. Remember, we are at our best and we maximize our success when we act now. The power is now.